We are enjoying our second day of aerosol geoengineering over the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County. It is the 6th day of the month. We had 4 treatments in the second week of November, and here we are in the 3rd week, and it is the 2nd day in a row that jets are flying over the city, dumping ash, dumping some kind of white powder into the sky as part of the weather management system of the national government, Washington, D.C., that uses the Air Force and no doubt private contractors to deliver the payload of cloud-making, haze-making, smog-making overcoverage of the city. This is a story we are continuing to follow here. David Tulis with Nooga Radio 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD for high definition for at Nooga Radio. I'm about to drop onto the internet a story that we'll just have as its primary draw the photographs around Chattanooga of this amazing phenomenon that has eluded even the strongest, most Democrat-oriented, most progressive liberal environmentalist in Southeast Tennessee. And that is the program that has as its fruits what you can see with your own eyes, these white tattoos, these reverse tattoos across the sky that spread out after a bit of dripping as they do, spread out across the sky to make cloud cover. And if it lasts till the evening, a lot of orange and pinks, because it is, after all, dust. It is a pollutant that has a hidden purpose, ostensibly a great purpose, or so some of us would try to be led to believe. Now, there is a dissenter in this process, and his name is J. Marvin Herndon. He is a crusty nuclear geochemist and a geophysicist with an interdisciplinary training and approach who doesn't take federal money. And so you're much more likely to hear from J. Marvin Herndon the truth about this official pollution, this injection of material in the sky for what may be a good purpose, but we really don't know, because it is wrapped in military security and secrecy. Dr. Herndon, we're having today over the skies of Chattanooga something that is really remarkable, and that is cloud creation by jet aircraft. What is happening to you in San Diego? What are you noticing on your side of the country with its ordinarily very blue Pacific skies?
Well, we're seeing the same thing, and this is not simply an American phenomenon, but it's a global phenomenon. I just got back from Greece, Israel, Italy. The same thing was happening there. Interest, especially during the Obama administration, decided to co-opt the military into spraying these particles in the air. Now, the military has always wanted to control the weather. And so that's what the military thinks they're doing, or at least I imagine they think they're doing that. But what they're really doing is being part of a program presumably initiated by the United Nations to put pollutant particles in the air. Pollutant particles in the air cause rain to be inhibited until the clouds become so saturated, torrents pour. It's a drought or deluge causing situation. Pollutant particles heat the atmosphere. Pollutant particles prevent the loss of Earth's heat. Now, you know, the Earth absorbs heat from the sun and it has to re-radiate it. Otherwise, we would end up incinerating ourselves. But these particles tend to inhibit some of that heat loss. And when they land on snow, the particles aren't really white. They're dark gray or black. It's just that the way physics operates, when you see them in the air, these fine particles, they have a different appearance. Depends on how they interact with light. But landing on snow, they tend to melt snow. In other words, the real purpose of the spraying is to cause global warming and disruption of our planet, disruption of its weather systems, poisoning its biosphere, and blame it on fossil fuel burning. I mean, this is the greatest scam ever perpetrated. And the scientific community, to my dismay and disgust, has been major pawns in this operation. I've been a member of the American Geophysical Union for some 45 years, and they have procedures. And one thing they do is they try to make a policy statement, which is a document that's intended to encourage people who want to know, or people who want to give it to people who want to know, to encourage some kind of political action. Well, I was sent a copy of a document, a proposed document on geoengineering. The scientists and their organizations want to encourage the government to make it possible for non-military entities to get involved with spraying pollutants into the atmosphere, allegedly to compensate for anthropogenic global warming produced by CO2, which is this is nonsense. The warming is produced by the particles that are being put in the air. The whole organizations, the scientists who study the atmosphere, the 1,500 or so scientists that are part of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they all talk about the effect of CO2, but none of them talk about the deliberate spraying of particles into the atmosphere and what that does. That turns their science into fake science. Well, I wrote a response back, and it was published quite quickly by a journal called New Concepts in Global Tectonics Journal. And I've provided your host with a link that perhaps he'll put on the website, that you can download it. And you can begin to understand some of the manipulations that are being done to make this even a bigger deal than the spraying by the military. Now, there have been a lot of papers written and published in the scientific literature lately about the adverse health effects caused by particles, pollutant particles in the air. But all of these, I mean, there's serious problems these things cause. I list some of them in this document. They're very serious problems for health that can include lung cancer and dementia, and well, it's depressing to even to think about. But the people who write about the problems of pollution are silent about the spraying. What they should be saying is that this is deliberate pollution put into the air that has the same or worse adverse effects on human life, on animal life, on our environment, on our plants. So this is a serious problem. And I'm taking all the time and talking, not giving your host a chance to slip a word in edgewise.
Well, go ahead. You're saying that saying that the Union of Concerned Geophysicists, the American Geophysical Union, it wants to have private corporate interests being able to spray this powder into the sky, this coal fly ash. And I will have you, my listener, know one thing, and that is that Dr. Herndon broke the story in 2015 after years of speculation about what it is that's being sprayed by these jets, at least since the time of President Kennedy, and it's coal fly ash, and that is the most convenient and the cheapest thing to it does not have to be manufactured. It does not have to be really modified. It can be dumped directly from the waste baskets of coal turbines and injected into the atmosphere again for this pretended purpose. And we're talking, and J. Marvin Herndon, who is a nuclear geophysicist and a geochemist who does not take the money of the good people, has his, as far as I can tell, has his head screwed on straight, and is making in the scientific literature the argument that it is coal fly ash that is in fact being sprayed, and probably if things are normal in that secret operation, Chattanooga is getting perhaps tons every month. Dr. Herndon, I posted yesterday that at least a ton of coal fly ash was poured over Chattanooga in the first of the 2 days in a row of this treatment.
That wouldn't surprise me a bit. Let me mention something as well. This document that I suggested you might put a link to. One of the references with respect to the medical issues is a paper that was published by a colleague and myself. The colleague is the medical director of the Florida Public Health Service for Monroe County. That's where Key West is, and so this is not just a nuclear geophysicist talking. It's a public health physician, and we've written a number of papers. It's very difficult to get them published because publishers are afraid. Everybody seems to be afraid to step out of line, or whatever this party line is. But that's that the same thing was apparently happened early in Nazi Germany when the atrocities were beginning to be committed. I mean, first they were done in secret, and then scientists provided some of the fake science about racial science that allowed Adolf Hitler to have laws passed that would allow, for example, forced sterilization of women against their will.
Well, let's move on from that point, Dr. Herndon. I think that the main story, the story that we're supposed to accept, is that the scientists are working feverishly to find a way of stopping anthropogenic global warming, which is to say global warming caused by my listener using a car and exhaling his breath and his children. We need to have fewer people on the planet, and since we can't slow this trend sufficiently rapidly by cutting back on deindustrialization and depopulation, we have to have Plan B, and that is a future Plan B, and that would be skystriping. And the federal government floated a paper, which we've discussed in detail at Nooganomics.com a couple years ago, that proposed this. So it's, in a way, what we're seeing today in the scientific literature is all prospective. It's something that we need to have. We need to research it. We need to find a cheap substance we can pour into the atmosphere, maybe volcanic ash, to dim the sun and to deflect the sun's heat from the surface of the earth. That seems to be the sort of standard.
Well, this is the narrative. Real deceit. The scientists talk about this as some perhaps future thing that might be needed to compensate for CO2 produced global warming, carbon dioxide produced global warming. That is so dishonest. Scientists should tell the truth. And the truth is that, especially since during the Obama administration, what used to be something that was done occasionally in limited measure by the military to learn how to control the weather. During the Obama administration, massive amounts of funding were supplied to pour millions of tons of this toxic material into the air where clouds form. And it doesn't stay there. It comes down and mixes with the air we breathe. Now, the scientists have lied by not telling the truth that there's spraying is going on. In fact, that I reference in that paper I tell you about, a deliberate attempt to mislead the scientific community, blatant misrepresentation. Scientists are simply not telling the truth. This is why they've been co-opted to become pawns in the biggest science fraud ever perpetrated. And they all march the same lockstep, because they want the money, and they're afraid that if they speak out, they will be excommunicated from science, like I was 40 years ago.
And the result, Marvin Herndon, the result of this acquiescence to funding and reputation is that me, David Tulis, your host here at Nooga Radio, and my listener, we're all effectively victims of a mass tort that is protected and shielded under the purported compelling state interest of military security. That's why we can't find out really a lot about what's happening. Who is the seller of this coal fly ash? Does TVA sell it? What the names of the middle distributing companies that make their profit transporting it from the from turbine hoppers to these jet-borne dispensaries. It's all in secret. We can't find these things out.
Well, the military, when they get money for something, whether it's nuclear warfare or weather warfare, they go hog wild and they'll spend it without reservation. I mean, in the nuclear framework, they did some horrific experiments, providing pregnant women, surreptitiously feeding pregnant women radioactive iron, or injecting newborn babies as young as a week old with radioactive iodine, or exposing school children to nuclear radiation. These experiments, though, were done on a small scale. What the military has been co-opted to do is to do a massive scale. Now, no military asset is worth the health of tens of millions of American citizens. I mean, that's nonsense. There's the military, people in the military need to really be looked at very carefully. There needs to be a full and open investigation within the military to find out who is allowing themselves to be so taken up with a program that is not simply a military advantage program, but something that is intended to cause global warming, to hurt human health, to hurt environmental health, to screw up the weather, the natural processes on our planet.
The evaporation rates of water, among other things. Well, listen, this is
everything, yes. And so this is, there should be a righteous outrage. And there are millions of people who are righteously outraged. And I salute you for helping to bring this information to your radio public.
Dr. Herndon, thanks so much for joining us.
You're always welcome.
This is David Tulis, and we've been talking with J. Marvin Herndon in San Diego, just on the phone. He is a nuclear geophysicist and a geochemist with an interdisciplinary approach, years and years in the scientific world, kind of a maverick. And he broke the story in 2015 that what we're having over Chattanooga is the dumping of industrial waste from the coal utility sector, and that is coal fly ash. He did several studies, and he's had He's had taken a lot of flack and trying to get his work published. He's had at least one paper rejected after it was published, and clearly he's onto something when he's had this much trouble getting scientific analyses out before the scientific public. This is David Tulis, and is it contradictory that the government on one hand can control your burning of a fire in your backyard and make you have a license for it, and yet elsewhere dumping millions of tons of pollution containing toxic metals such as mercury and arsenic over the sky of our city? No, there's no contradiction at all, because it's thanks to the modern state. This is David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your time. And now some messages.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3.